Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, during the past couple of days, we've had ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testifying on Capitol Hill. And, of course, she had to answer questions about Iran. Now, as we discussed the other day, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard kind of built her entire career first, I think, on the basis of no war with Iran, no war with Iran. She criticized Trump's first term that he was provoking fights with Iran. She criticized him, and we went through this in detail the other day. She criticized him for walking away from the JCPOA. She criticized him for assassinating General Soleimani, and didn't like all of this belligerent talk. So that was the thing. So that was one part of her selling.
And she was a bona fide foreign policy expert. I mean,
Right,
there's no doubt
exactly.
about that. No
That's
doubt
right.
about that.
And the other part of her, her shtick, so to speak, was she presented herself as the model of personal integrity. That was it. That she had the look. Her voice was always, vibrant with sincerity, and she had this way of looking very intensely
But
into the camera,
but very
but
cautious.
very calm.
Very,
But everything was that she was a person of principle. That she was she was on a loftier, more morally elevated level than anyone else. And how many times did she talk about my brothers and sisters in uniform? With my brothers and sisters in uniform. We must not do anything at all that would endanger the lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform. Went on and on and on like this. So this was her shtick. And of course, as often happens, the people who make personal integrity their selling point are the ones who are the least capable of personal integrity. And I think her position now in the administration is so disgraceful. This isn't just somebody who's, oh, well, I'm dealing with transportation issues. I'm not really dealing with Iranian issues. Or, well, we're talking about one thing and I used to talk about something else and they're only tangentially involved. No, you are actively involved in the very policy that you essentially built your career up as opposing, and that you don't feel that it's incumbent upon you to resign from this administration just shows a total lack of character, total
well, I
lack
mean,
of
and
integrity.
also in the political realm, her duplicity, she has no pundits supporting her. No one, zero.
No,
No one wants you around.
right.
No
That's right.
one.
No, that's right. Now she may well calculate that, well, in 6, 9 months' time, she'll make a principled resignation. She will then submit her letter, dear President Trump, I cannot in good conscience
No,
continue.
you had to do that 2 days ago.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because so by doing what she has done, staying on, and essentially advancing a policy that she had, built up her career opposing, she has essentially ended her political career. That's it. This is the zenith of her
No coming
career.
back.
There'll be nothing further after
There's
this.
no coming back.
Right. Right.
Because then you'll say, well, what do you really believe?
Right. Exactly. That's it. What do you really believe? And now she has become a laughing stock. And that's always the worst possible thing for any politician to do. You can be hated, you can be resented, attacked. All sorts of people can say all
All of
sorts of.
our great politicians, you
Right,
just described
exactly,
them. You just
exactly.
described all of our great
That's right.
politicians.
Yeah, reviled. You could be the subject of really the meanest, nastiest personal attacks. But you can't be a laughing stock. The moment people start laughing at you, that means no one takes you seriously, and that means you're done. That's really the last stage of your career. And there may be a gig at Fox News. You can always do something like that. But even that, I doubt. She actually doesn't have a particularly good television personality. She's a
Now, her
little.
podcasts were I think she wound that down. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it wasn't working. She doesn't, that's not part of her skill set.
No, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. But anyway, she they testified on the Hill, and she had to explain, well, what's really happened with Iran. And so she said this about Iran's current capabilities. It says, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. So it was obliterated by last June. Okay. There has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Okay. And then the entrances to the underground facilities that were bombed have been buried and shuttered with cement. Okay. We continue to monitor for any early indicators on what position the current or any new leadership in Iran will take with regard to authorizing a nuclear weapons program. So it was obliterated. No efforts have been made to rebuild their enrichment capability, kind of what we knew. The entrances to the underground facilities are buried and shuttered with cement, so nobody can get to them. And we're monitoring for any early indicators or with regard to authorizing a nuclear weapons program. So in other words, there's no nuclear weapons program, so it has to be authorized. So why is the United States attacking Iran? Why, the
No,
biggest war, in
you know,
25 years?
everybody knows my eyesight's going, but where's the imminent danger?
Well, that's it. That, of
I'm
course,
still looking. I'm still
that's it.
looking.
Exactly. And that, of course, is something that came up. So here's the New York Times. And the New York Times, summarizing her performance, it says, on Wednesday, the director of national intelligence, CIA director, contradicted one of the justifications the Trump administration had given for its attacks on Iran. And then it says, the two top intelligence officials directly contradicted one of Trump administration's justification for going to war with Iran, repeating on Wednesday the intelligence community's conclusion that Iran was years away from developing missiles capable of hitting the United States. And then she was testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee. And they would not say whether the intelligence community had determined that Iran would be able to launch such a long-range missile within 6 months. So, yeah, where's the imminent danger? And then, but when pressed by Senator John Ossoff, Democrat of Georgia, Ms. Gabbard refused to provide an assessment of the threat Iran posed. It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay. All right. I would have just said, I'm sorry, this hearing is over. You should resign right now in public with your head hanging low and
Right.
exit the building now.
Yeah.
That
It is so contemptible, absolutely contemptible. So what's the point?
what are you doing?
What's the point of having an intelligence community and the enormous amounts of money that is spent on this? Was it 17 intelligence agencies, and I don't know how many thousands of people work in the intelligence
And
community.
what's the budget? It's a black budget. We
It,
don't know.
that's right. And if all, well, we just provide the information. Oh, that's all we do. We just all provide the information. I mean, well, what's the point of that? I mean, anybody can just provide information. I mean, the whole point of having an intelligence community is precisely to analyze the threat, not to provide interesting academic issues. Well, what is this going to happen? Or no, that's for the academic seminar room. The whole point of paying for an intelligence community is precisely, is there an imminent threat? And she said, well, it's up to the president.
And she knows that.
Of course. Ms. Gabbard affirmed the conclusion reached by the Trump administration's DIA last year that it will be a decade before Iran could get past the technological hurdles to produce weapons capable of reaching the United States.
Well, as a result of this war, that could be 6 months now.
And here's the Axios, which says Gabbard defers to Trump when asked if Iran posed imminent threat. And then the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, said that only the president can determine if a nation poses an imminent threat during a Wednesday Senate hearing on worldwide threats. The reason why I think this is very interesting is that this is going to be wrapped around her neck, this issue of the imminent threat. Everyone's going to remember this. You were the one, you were asked, was there an imminent threat? And you said, well, I don't know, it's not up to me. I'm not in charge of the intelligence gathering.
Okay, but
That's up
Tulsi,
to the president to determine it.
if you were in charge and you the president, would you consider it an
Right.
imminent? I mean, come on. This
Yeah.
is actually your high school here. Come on.
That's right. This is the worst kind of trying to make debate as points. Everyone hates that. Everyone hates when people try to be loyally and cute and again, this is somebody who touted her personal integrity. And then again, they talk about the Senator John Ossoff asked Gabbard whether it was the intelligence community's assessment that the Iranian regime posed an imminent nuclear threat, to which she said that the IC assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild its nuclear enrichment.
Well, that's not an answer to the question.
That's not exactly. That's a different issue. We know that's all we know. We don't need ODNI. We know that they were never willing to give up nuclear enrichment. They've said this in public many times. Well, Iran maintained its intention to rebuild its nuclear enrichment capabilities. Well, I mean, what do we need her for? Arakchi said that.
Exactly. Yeah, free advice. Just ask the foreign minister of Iran, Arachi.
And then pressed again, she replied, "The only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president." So I just simply work here. It's just the president. It's all his decision. I mean, can you imagine having so little integrity? Just saying, well, I was tasked to be the head of intelligence gathering. I went through the Senate confirmation process. It was a lot of votes, but apparently I don't really have any views on whether something is an imminent threat or not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the way you wiggle out of this, which is not going to happen. Yes, we determined that there was no imminent threat, but that's up for the president to decide one way or another. But
Right.
we gave him. I mean, if she was the person of integrity that she claims to
Right.
be and built her entire career around, she should have said that. Yes, the intelligence community says that there was not an immediate threat. We passed it on to the president. The president made his decision.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And then it is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent
Keep
threat.
digging, Tulsi. Keep digging.
I think so.
God.
Going on to argue that he provides the input with which the president makes decisions on imminent threats. So this is so ridiculous. I mean, you're not entrusted to be, an academic seminar. That's not not what you're about. And then thought bubble. Gabbard's contention that only the president can determine whether there's an imminent threat to the U.S. is surprising, coming from the head of the intelligence community. Axios national security editor Dave Lawler writes.
Well, Axios, you didn't need to go to David Lawyer to get that. You could have asked anyone. You could have asked,
it is
you could ask
surprising.
a taxi driver. Okay.
I mean, at least, those guys in Gulf War One, they just said, yeah, well, we got it wrong. At least you had the honesty to say, yeah, we got it wrong. I mean, everything that we said, when we said, what was it? It was going to be a slam dunk of George Tenet, the CIA director, was going to be a slam dunk. Well, okay, he got it wrong. I mean, have at least the honesty to say that. But I mean, to start doing this weaselly, loyally kind of responses, that is really grating. While it is the president's decision to respond to a threat, the intelligence community frequently provides assessments of the severity of potential threats to the homeland. That's kind of its job. I mean, there's no other reason. The only reason states, developed um, espionage, intelligence, capabilities is to know whether there was a threat or not. I mean, why else have an intelligence capability?
That's why the DNI exists
Right,
in the wake of 9/11. That's
right.
why it exists.
Yeah, and states since time immemorial have hired spies. Why do they have spies? To provide information. Is there a threat? In fact, Gabbard made the remarks in the hearing about the intelligence community's assessment of global threats. Yeah, that was the whole point of her testimony. It was the title of this hearing was the assessment of as to global threats. Hey, well, I don't know whether it's a global threat or not. It's up to the president. It's not up to me to decide whether it's a threat or not. Anyway, so that was that. Now, the other thing that took place the other day was, of course, the long interview of Tulsi of Tucker Carlson and Joe Kent. It was very lengthy, and it lasted about 2 hours. And obviously, we went on at some length on Wednesday about Joe Kent's letter, the one that he was an open letter explaining the reasons for his resignation. But the thrust of his letter was the policy is not being set by the United States, is being set by Israel. And of course, during the interview, he elaborated on that. But he also went on to talk about some other things, which are quite interesting. I mean, whether one believes it or doesn't believe it, nonetheless, he thought that there were still unexplained aspects to the to the assassination attempt on President Trump, and there was unexplained what happened to Charlie Kirk. So that these are issues that somehow are still there's much that we don't know, and no one seems to be very curious, and no one seems to want to investigate any further. And I think that was.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people making a lot of false accusations or claims about that interview.
Yes.
If there's in any kind of probably normal investigation, there's 100 leads. Maybe they all go nowhere,
Good.
but you should do it. You should try it. Okay.
Right.
And if there were some kind of foreign element to the assassination of Charlie Cook, we should know about that.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Investigating it means it's true. No, it's reversed. You investigate to find out if it's true.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Now, it was entirely predictable that after the interview, Joe Kent would be attacked for, yes, anti-Semitism. What a surprise. But even before the issue of the anti-Semitism, the Trump administration put out that he's under investigation for leaking. So they're actually thinking about prosecuting him. And not quite sure to whom he's supposed to have leaked. I mean, Mark Levin was claiming, oh, he leaked to Tucker Carlson. But I find that surprising because Tucker Carlson never really, we know his views on the Iran war, but he never talks about anything that's classified.
Well, and Joe Kent, if you watch the interview carefully, Joe Kent is aware of that.
Right.
He's aware of, and and he's not very experienced. I mean, he seems just very genuine. And I want to make it very clear. I mean, George and I are not supporters of Joe Kent. We're supporters of what he did
Right,
in his
exactly.
resignation.
That's right.
Okay, because he
Exactly.
said many things in that interview that I vehemently disagree with.
Right.
Okay, but I got the feeling that he parsed his words very carefully, and he didn't make one accusation.
Right. I agree. But here was the Axios, which naturally, again, our good friend Barack Ravid, Joe Kent, has been under FBI investigation for months, months, on suspicions he leaked classified information. Immediately after,
Let's get something clear here. You mean he's been under investigation since he had that position? Because that's what it sounds like.
that's right.
It looks like if this is true, that they were building a case against him from day one. That's how I read this.
I think so. Immediately after his resignation, administration officials said he had been a known leaker.
Then why was he still in it?
Well, that's a very
Why didn't
good
you
point.
fire him before he was resigned?
Exactly. And had been cut out of briefings with the president. Now, it seems like the way it works with Trump is that he cuts people out who he thinks are going to disagree with him. So that's not necessarily a mark against you if you've been cut out of the briefings. It means, yeah, you've been cut
Well,
out.
no, the fact that he was cut out is a very that's an ace up his sleeve. I wasn't even there. I wasn't even in the room.
That's right, exactly. Um, but White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and that isn't her remit, she was in the room. Anyway, Semaphore reported that Kent, who led the National Counterterrorism Center, had been placed under investigation prior to his resignation. Axios independently confirmed. One of the sources said Kent was suspected of leaking to Tucker Carlson and another conservative podcaster. That source says the FBI was also examining leaked intel related to Israel and
Okay,
Iran.
well, I mean, okay, I'm one source said Kent was suspected of leaking to Tucker Carlson. So, do is that through email, taped recordings? Do you have a listening device in Tucker's kitchen?
Right.
Um, what does that mean?
I also don't know why or what exactly he would be leaking to Tucker
Well, okay,
Carlson.
all right. Let's do the test. You and I watch most of Tucker's
Mm.
monologues and interviews. So, remembering what Tucker has said during both formats, I was never under the impression that he had classified information. Did you?
No,
No.
everything that he says is invariably about what's in the public realm. He talks about what Megyn Kelly says, what Glenn Greenwald says, what Ben Shapiro says, Mark Levin says. It's never about the intricacies of operational planning. I've never heard him talking about that.
How many times he said, "My sources inform me"? He doesn't. That's not his. Not a
That's not.
throwaway line for him.
Moreover, he Tucker Carlson is actually in, with the insiders. He met Trump several times prior to Trump's decision to launch Operation Epic Fury. He met him. He advised Trump not to do it. Trump didn't take the advice, but Tucker's been upfront about it. So therefore, Tucker doesn't need Joe Kent to provide him with any information about what's going on in the administration. He knew all the people who were briefing Trump, and he was one of the people briefing Trump. Trump didn't listen to his advice. So why would he need any classified information when
Yeah,
he's already at the highest level of the administration?
if Kent was cut out of the briefings, then what would he be leaking if he wasn't there?
That's a good point. um, And then few details have been released because the investigation revolves around classified information. And then one source said he left quite an online paper trail and he has been monitored for months. He's going to try to say this was in retaliation for his resignation, the source says, but it's the other way around. He quit because he's under investigation and he knew it. Um, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
this
who
is what you
is.
called a witch hunt.
That's
Okay.
right. It sounds like Sebastian
So
Gorka.
if he drowns, he wasn't a witch. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's unclear why Kent was not immediately fired if he had been placed under investigation before Tuesday. That indeed does raise that question. If he was suspected of leaking, why did he continue in that job? Kent had run afoul. I mean, apart from anything else, the entire culture of Washington, and we talked about this the other day, entire culture of Washington is based on leaks. The New York Times is all leaks. What insiders in the administration are telling us. It's
The
all
New York
leaks.
leaks. That's what it's
Yeah.
the New York leaks. Yeah.
Kent had run afoul of the FBI last year when he tried to access investigative records into the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, the New York Times
Why the
reported.
word foul?
Well, it's also very interesting. I mean, since he's in charge of counterterrorism, he kind of has some,
Kinda.
you know,
Kinda.
yeah,
Kinda.
why wouldn't he be involved in the investigation? But he ran afoul of the FBI. Kent believes a foreign agent may have been involved in the assassination, and then We'll take a look at what happened in that interview in a minute. And now here's AP. This is the Associated Press. This is the leading kind of wire service. And look at this headline: Joe Kent's resignation of Iran war reignites anti-Semitism fears.
No, it didn't. I didn't get that from the interview. Did you?
Yes. And debate over Israeli influence. Well, that's an interesting. They put the foot anti-Semitism. People
Yep.
aren't going to get beyond that word anti-Semitism. They see
Yep.
that first, and then the debate over Israeli influence. Well, debate over Israeli influence seems to be a very legitimate thing
Yeah.
to have to debate. I mean, Israeli influence on the U.S. government. It was no surprise when Joe Kent showed up on Tucker Carlson's podcast a day after quitting his counterterrorism job. Here was a top official who resigned to protest the war with Iran, turning to right-wing media's leading critic of the conflict. And then the Israelis drove the decision to take this action, Kent said in the interview. But before long, the conversation moved in a direction as Kent nodded to conspiracy theories that pro-Israel forces were behind the assassination of. He didn't say that. When you say nodded to, what do you mean nodded to? He just simply said that there needs to be further investigation, but he didn't to suggest that he was pro-Israeli forces. He never said that there were pro-Israeli forces
He
who were.
never said that.
Right,
Never left his lips. Nope.
right. I'm saying there are unanswered questions, and we'll take a look in a second. The conversation encapsulated two schisms within the Republican Party and the right-wing media system, both of which have reached high into the national security establishment of the Trump administration. There's a foreign policy debate over the wisdom of Trump's war with Iran and the future of the United States' long-standing alliance with Israel. But there are also fears that the focus on Israel is the leading edge of an anti-Semitic fringe that has gained ground by portraying Jews as shadowy manipulators, echoing some of history's most hateful
Now,
tropes.
see, that is just pure nonsense. That is complete invention. There is not a shred of evidence to support that
Right.
paragraph.
None.
That's pure supposition and propaganda. Okay.
Exactly. But that you see, they always do this, which is, well, you bring up Israel, and then because he's talking about the Jews. And not only is he talking about the Jews, he's invoking hateful trope, the hateful historical tropes about the Jews. No, who's talking about the Jews? And he wasn't talking about the
This
Jews.
kind of media is talking about the Jews.
That's right. At the center of both issues is Carlson, a former Fox News host who remains influential among conservatives. He has previously denounced for hosting Nick Fuentes. So they always say he's hosting. He interviewed him. I mean, this has always been done. You always interview people. You don't agree with the people you interview. This,
Well, CBS News has repeatedly been interviewing Arachi, which they should do. It's a media
right, right.
organization. So
But
are they, is ABC and CBS hosting the,
that's right. Hosting. You said this is like they use it hosting. Like, okay, it's an interview. And a white nationalist, and on his podcast during the interview, Fuentes complained about the organized jury in America. But that was Fuentes. If that's what Fuentes said, it wasn't Tucker Carlson who said that. Fuentes said this. And in any case, organized jury in America. I mean, that's a factual issue. I mean, that's not. I mean,
yeah,
juries are very well organized in the United
ask
States.
Charlie Kirk.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, all these organizations like the Anti-Defamation League or the Zionist Organization of America. I mean, you go through this list. What the hell is that other than organized jury? On Wednesday, Carlson was sharply critical about Israel, saying its lobbying in the United States pressured the president. And
And
then Kent's resignation.
is that disputed?
That's right. And then here's this Kent's resignation letter traffic in anti-Semitic
No, it
conspiracy theories.
didn't.
We went through it in great detail.
Who wrote this? Did you even watch the interview?
No. This is AP. This isn't MSNBC or anything like this. Is the Associated Press. He blamed high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media for encouraging the conflict. Indeed, Israeli leaders, including Benjamin Netanyahu, encouraged Trump to join forces in an attack on Iran.
So the 7 meetings that Netanyahu had with Trump, they talked about
They talked about the weather,
they talk about recipes,
yeah, the
maybe
recipe and
favorite
sport,
pizza.
yeah, sport. They were talking about the World Cup and and that sort of thing. But Kent also went further, saying it's the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq War. And that's
Very well documented.
very well documented. But he went further, oh, well, how, again, we talked about this the other day, this attempt to suggest that Israel had nothing to do with the Iraq War, total lie. He also said his wife, a Navy cryptologist who was killed by a suicide bomb in Syria, died in a war manufactured by Israel. Yeah, the intervention in Syria was indeed manufactured by Israel.
Yeah, very well documented.
That's right. And then Senator Mitch McConnell, a Kentucky Republican, described the letter as virulent anti-Semitism.
Well,
Now,
of course, Mitch, you would, of course.
but
Okay.
the question is that did Mitch? I mean, I didn't know Mitch McConnell was still alive. I mean, last time I saw him, he was kind of rigidly staring into space. So I don't know when he was managed to put this out about the virulent anti-Semitism. So
I must admit I did not know he was still with us. Okay.
yeah, so you have to then wonder who wrote this virulent anti-Semitism. And then Representative Josh Gottheimer, a New Jersey Democrat, said scapegoating Israel isn't just a tired anti-Semitic trope, it's anti-American.
Okay, well, that's all we need to know about you, Josh.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
I mean, if you criticize Israel or criticizing America, that is so patently stupid, and
right.
it's not even worth reacting
That's
to. So,
right. And then this is the interview where and here we have Tucker Carlson says, okay, so then you have to ask, I'm just following the logic train here, what kind of pressure does it require to get a president who campaigned against exactly this thing for 10 years to do exactly this thing? What does it take to do that? And then says, I wish I knew definitively. I think there's two potentials. There's two schools of thought. One is the media echo chamber, the donors, the way these Israelis come in and kind of launder the information, like I described previously. And then the other option is much darker. And then, I mean, we still don't know what happened in Butler. We don't know what happened with Charlie Kirk. And by no means am I saying the Israelis did this or any of that, but I'm saying there's a lot of unanswered questions there. And there is enough data to at least say there's a good chance that President Trump feels like he is under threat. All right, so he's saying that. I mean, you can agree with that, you can disagree with that, but it seems not an unreasonable issue, and people have talked about this, that there is always the threat of violence and there's always the threat of assassination, and particularly in the case of Trump, who has indeed, been a victim of assassination on more than one occasion.
Well, it's also interesting if you read this, this is very, these words are parsed very well. And he's speaking like an intelligence
Right.
officer. Okay. We don't know. I mean, he's just saying, from what we can see, there are places that we may be able to look, but we're not sure, but we
Right.
have to cross it off. I mean,
Right.
he's answering the question as an intelligence officer.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're not allowed to ask, basically, was there any linkage between what took place with Asif Merchant, who was recruited by the Iranians to come to America to recruit proxies to kill President Trump? That was the allegation that was made by the Biden administration. It was a very, very mysterious, murky allegation. The FBI put a confidential human source on him. All this is public now. This is all out there in the open. And he's arrested. And then 2 days later, a sniper takes a shot at President Trump. So he's saying this is all very strange. And then the Biden administration puts out this story, oh, Iran is seeking to assassinate Trump. All of it is just very, very peculiar, that all of the sequence of events in 2024. Why did the Biden intelligence people suddenly put out the story about Iran is trying to assassinate Trump? And knowing that Trump would then take this personally, as he evidently did.
Yeah, we got him before he got me.
That's
Yeah.
right. And then it says, we think Merchant and the CHS, confidential human source, they were talking about, hey, we could kill the president potentially with a sniper rifle, but then they arrest him. 2 days later, Butler happens, and Crooks, to the official narrative anyways, is an enigma. We don't know anything about him. We can't get into his devices. If we did get into his devices, maybe there's nothing there. And then it says, no more questions are allowed to be asked about Thomas Crooks. The DHS Inspector General is currently being blocked from investigating Butler at all. Butler as well. That's out in the media. That's all well known. Your investigative journalist found that Crooks did indeed have an online persona.
This is making a reference to a documentary.
Exactly. The your is referring to Tucker, because Tucker, I can't remember, it was several months ago, did a feature on Thomas Crooks. And he said there was, in fact, an online presence by Crooks. Your investigative journalist found that Crooks did indeed have an online persona, quite an extensive one. He was talking to people. So it's like, why aren't we investigating this? All very good questions. Yeah.
So reasonable.
Yeah.
It's because, he's asking these questions, George. You know why? Because he's an anti-Semite.
That's exactly.
What?
But the Crooks thing is indeed very strange, because we seemingly we don't know anything about him. He organized this assassination really quite efficiently. Managed to send a drone up in the air to do a surveillance. And then we have, his parents. We know nothing about his parents, or, what they knew about what his son was doing. I mean, it's amazing how the whole thing, was shut down immediately. A kind of lone assassin, somebody without any online persona, just one day decided to assassinate Trump.
And the crime scene is immediately cleaned up, and the
crime
guy
scene is immediately
cremated.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, an attempted murder of a presidential candidate, and then there's another assassination attempt. There's been multiple public breaches of President Trump's security over the last year. And then Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way. And we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. So, I mean, what he's getting at here, I guess, is, because if we go back to the original question, why did Trump completely reverse himself. I mean, he's sort of suggesting, well, there are all sorts of threats that are omnipresent, and then that could
Well,
explain why he made this reversal.
or maybe this is the manufactured um, history for Donald Trump personally, that they're after you, Mr.
Right,
President.
right,
So that maybe this is the impulse that Trump is re But see, if that were true, and considering how glib that Trump can be, he would, I think, said, well, they're trying to kill me.
right.
And he's never really said that. I mean,
No,
except that we got him before he got me.
right,
Okay. But
right.
why would
No,
he
no,
stop
you're right. He
there?
hasn't said that. He has not said that. Um, what he has said, which is completely ludicrous, is that Iran was planning to attack the United States.
Yeah.
Um, which is, which is a far more ludicrous assertion that Iran was trying to assassinate me.
Yeah, but see, this is the danger that people like Philip Giraldi that used to be in the CIA, and he's on a number of times told me how the groupthink works.
Right,
Okay, so you have Tulsi Gabbard that is completely discredited. Her shelf life has expired. I mean, she really just should pack up and move on.
right,
Joe Kent will be harassed for a very long time. Maybe end up in prison. It's not impossible. So what is the conclusion of that? So you just have someone as the DNI that will just mirror what the president wants,
right.
irrespective of,
That's right.
evidence.
Right. That's right.
Is that a better place to go? Is that a better place for the country to be? That's what it looks like they want.
Right. No, I think that is what that was the plan, and I think that's why I think Glenn Greenwald I think referred to Tulsi Gabbard. She's just an ornament. That she's an ornament for the administration. It looks nice. We'll have her, testifying before the Senate. And she'll talk about my brothers and sisters in uniform, and it's a nice photo op. But we don't actually want you to do any serious intelligence analysis. No,
No,
no, no.
because we have the Mossad do that for us.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, as Trump said, you remember he said that during the 12-day war. Oh, Tulsi Gabbard said that Iran has no intention of developing nuclear weapons, and then he said, "I don't care what she said." I mean, at least he's honest about it. I don't care what she said. So, and then he says, and Charlie Kirk was one of Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against the war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very generous to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing in the stairway. And I said hi to him. And he looked me in the eye and he said very loudly, "It's a small space. You've been in the West Wing. It's a tight space." And he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran." Very loudly. And he was single minded. And he walked off and he went, I believe, into the Oval. Um, so, I mean, that at least, it's consistent with everything we knew at that time when he was vocally, along with Tucker Carlson, very much against the upcoming war. And then, so when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us not to go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, is then suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that, it's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
Again, talking like an intelligence
Right?
officer.
I agreed. And then, okay, Tucker Carlson, then what do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that? Well, we've been told that this individual, Robinson, this is Tyler Robinson, the man who's been arrested, is a lone gunman. And maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, that the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything is going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there's still a lot of us to look, a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down.
Well, if he wanted to leak, he could have leaked right there, but he didn't.
Right, exactly. But of course, it is interesting. I mean, why is it just being handled by the Utah state authorities. I mean,
Maybe this is an exaggeration, but I don't think the feds just say, "Well, let the Utah people take care of
right?
it." The feds don't do that.
That's not that,
That's not their style. What do they call it? Being big-footed?
yeah,
The local authorities is always big-footed by the feds.
right, right, exactly. Um, and the way it's working, I mean, it's like, where is this heading? It's heading towards a plea deal, which means there's a plea deal. There's not going to be a trial. If it's a plea deal, in which case, Tyler Robinson gets life without possibility of parole, and in return, there'll be no trial. And then that's it. The case is closed. And we never get to find out anything.
That'll go over well.
Yes. And then says, I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying, and Tucker Carlson, no, I don't think you are. Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against the war with Iran. And we knew at the end of the 12-day war, at the end of Midnight Hammer, that the Israelis were going to come back and ask us to go back to war again. Yeah, that's a surprise. I
Well,
mean,
and think about it, everyone. Here's Joe Kent in his position, and he sees all these data points.
right.
And then he sees a public figure, a well-known figure and beloved by many, not all.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Kirk gets killed. And so Joe Kent and Charlie Kirk are kind of on the same
Right.
wavelength.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the guy that's on your wavelength is summarily executed in public. How do you think Joe feels? It's like,
Right.
oh, they kill people like that, people
That's
that think like that, like I think.
right. Exactly. Exactly. Um, that's yeah. And then, so we have a lot of data points between Butler, the assassination attempts against President Trump, the breaches of his security, what happened to Charlie Kirk, and then Tucker Carlson. Can I just ask you to pause on the Charlie Kirk situation? Yeah. And because it upsets me to hear what you're saying, to be reminded that he was murdered, but also to hear you confirm what was reported in the media several months ago, that your office had been blocked from investigating his murder. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand why you would ever turn down help in an investigation from a US agency with a lot of experience in gathering intelligence on things. That's your job. And then the FBI will say, and the DOJ will say, that's because it's an ongoing case. It's a Utah state case. That back off. They've got it. They've got a smoking case. They've got the fingerprints of the gun, and they've got the case. But the FBI was involved in case. The FBI was involved. The FBI has basically said that they're deferring to Utah because it's now a case. They've established precedent for federal investigation of this crime. And then yeah, and the National Counterterrorism Center's mandate is to investigate any foreign ties to see if there's potentially any foreign ties. If we don't find any foreign ties, we back off. What I'm saying about getting into too much detail is that there was more for us to investigate. So that's really the question. Why was this curtailed? You believe there was reason to investigate foreign ties to Charlie Kirk's murder, and were told by the FBI, DOJ, Joe Kent, the FBI, DOJ, yeah. And then, no, you're not allowed to investigate that, stop. They basically cut off our access to be able to get into that information. And look, I didn't even say necessarily I believe there's 100% foreign ties. There were data points that we needed to investigate. I mean, I think anybody who's even looked into any kind of police investigation, you get 100 leads, you run them down, and 99 don't mean anything. We still had a lot more leads to run down that pertain to some kind of a foreign nexus that we were stopped from investigating. Okay, and then that just strikes me as inconceivable that that could happen. And again, I was aware of it from reading about it, but not really to the extent that you've just described. So I would love to hear the justification for that. And can you flesh out a little bit more? What were you told was the reason to prevent you, as a federal intelligence official running the National Counterterrorism Center, from looking into the murder when you had reason to look into it? And then, well, the way the bureaucracy works is they can just kill things in process. So initially, we were cut off pretty early on from being able to access the files and to being able to send people out there. We sent people out initially to work in the task force, and after the crisis period, the first week or so, that dispersed, and we were basically told that we'll get back to you if we find any kind of foreign ties that we want you guys to look into, which is very strange because it would be up to, I would have thought, the National Counterterrorism Center to look into that, rather
Well,
than, well, we'll look into it and then we'll
you,
let you know.
you would, I don't know, it would seem that they have the upper hand here. Hey, we're going to exhaust this here. You know, you
Yeah,
cool your heel. Well, you stay in your lane. We're going to go in our lane. We're going to look at foreign. I mean, I don't understand who has the leverage here.
yeah.
I would have thought Joe Kent's people would have said, "What are you talking about? This is what our job is.
This is
Okay,
exactly.
we'll get back to you. Okay."
Well, that's right, because if you have a high profile assassination, I mean, it automatically you would start thinking about, well, are there any foreign ties to it? And here he's saying, no, this was immediately suppressed. Meanwhile, we had already dug up a decent amount of leads. Again, I'm not saying that we have anything concrete, but we found more work that we needed to do to say that we had done our due diligence. And then we were then told that, hey, you guys need to stop. You can't work on this anymore. I had a bureaucratic dispute about it. Eventually, we were allowed to continue to investigate, but then in a very short order, all the requests that we would make, that normally different parts of the interagency with the FBI being on point would facilitate, data sharing is a big thing and so on. These requests were just never met. Or, in my opinion, not an honest effort was given to fulfill those requests. Just basic information that any competent police service, which I believe that Utah has, and the FBI, that they would have access to help us run down the leads to either confirm or deny some kind of foreign activity. So that's it. So you could see from all of this that at the very least he's saying there were obviously some very odd aspects of it. You know, he's not saying Israel was behind this. He's not going down the sort of Candace Owens path. He said there were aspects of it that needed further investigation, but we were told stay the hell out of this. So
George,
and then
what was your assessment of his character in that interview?
I thought he had this is a person who had some integrity. I thought you know, as you said at the beginning, you know, there was a lot that he said that was very dubious, and you know, very questionable in his interpretation. I mean, he seemed to celebrate the assassination of General Soleimani. I don't know why he did that, but nonetheless, I think he did take seriously. There is a kind of genuineness about that. He did take seriously. Hey, Trump promised to keep us out of wars. Trump promised that there'll be no forever wars, and we're kind of doing the opposite of what we ran on in 2024. I mean, I think he had the integrity to say that.
And he had nothing derogatory to say about Trump.
He didn't. He never attacked him.
Never attacked him. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Um, you know, the interview was so effective, so powerful, and importantly, so easy to understand.
Right.
It wasn't convoluted.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't highfalutin and theoretical. It wasn't philosophical. And because it was all those things, you got the avalanche against him right after it, okay? Where media, AP, everybody else, all they did overdrive is muddy the waters,
That's right.
muddy the water.
That's
You
right.
know, in almost all of the coverage, these people with their derogatory intent never addressed the essence of the
No.
interview.
No. No.
What it was is their interpretation of the
Right.
interview. And
Right.
this is the dishonesty of these people,
Right.
okay?
Right.
How many of these news outlets, I got, they're flooded on Twitter. Um, did they actually examine the letter?
No. No. None. None. None at all. So if you are, you know, if you attempt to refute it, then of course you have to make arguments. So the best way is not to make an argument and is just to say is anti-Semitic, because when they do attempt to refute, as in the claim that, oh well, Israel had nothing to do with the Iraq invasion, boom, you can easily refute that. So the best thing is not even to make any of those claims. Just say, well, he's anti-Semitic. Tucker Carlson is anti-Semitic. Oh, and by the way, he had what's the name of that guy, the white nationalist? Fuentes.
Fuentes.
Yeah, Fuentes. Oh, and he had Fuentes. Always bring that up. Oh, he hosted Fuentes, and that's it. You don't have to address any of the arguments that he made. But that's the key issue. Why exactly is the United States at war with Iran? What kind of a threat does Iran pose to the United States? I mean, that's it. That's the don't go on about the Jews.
Yeah, but that just tells
What's
you.
the threat Iran?
Well, it just shows that Joe Kent and Tucker Carlson, Glenn Greenwald, Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, Katie Helper, you and I, we're over the target. And that's what they're worried about. They're really worried about that. Look at the amount of effort to discredit this guy on this thesis. It's a legitimate debating point. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there is no debate. Okay, I watch on the sideline in bewilderment how they're just saying, "Oh, this is inconceivable. This is you're psycho. These people are psychotic.
Right, right.
They're psychotic."
But this is where, I mean, why when you raised this issue at the end of the last video, I thought it's worth really examining. Is it still damaging? Is it really career-ending, reputation-destroying to call someone anti-Semitic?
I
Because
think
that's what Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro, that's what they're trying to do with Tucker Carlson. You just keep saying it over and over and over again: anti-Semite, anti-Semite, neo-Nazi, fascist, and so on. Now, these people have a lot of influence. I mean, they're on Fox News. Tucker Carlson isn't on Fox News. So the question is, are they able to, just simply through the weight, the economic, financial power that they represent, can they destroy somebody's reputation? Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to absolutely
I
destroy
think I
Tucker
think
Carlson once and for all.
less and less so. Okay, less and less. I mean, excuse me. It's repeated so often now that it doesn't have any. It's like you're a racist. Okay,
Yeah,
that's kind of been diluted. I think this whole anti-Semitism thing is being diluted. And why is that the most important thing? I mean, that I always find that kind of odd. Okay, and the the amount of effort that goes into shielding Israel and the Israeli influence on the U.S. government is inordinate.
right,
You never see anything like it ever.
right,
Okay,
right,
and the maybe the level of distrust, level of dislike of Jews is increasing because of what these gatekeepers keep doing. Israel Jews, Israel
right.
Zionism,
That's
they're
right.
all the same thing. Well, it's backfiring. I mean, I think it's a genocidal regime. Okay, so you're saying that Jews, the regime, Zionism, all the same thing. So you can use simple logic by saying, oh, so Jews are committing genocide.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the more you wrap those things
Right.
together, the more it is open to criticism and at least interpretation. It's giving negative returns.
No, I agree. No, I think it's a very good point, because if you say, well, if you criticize Israel, that means or if you're attacking Israel, you're attacking the Jews, then you can, well, therefore you draw the opposite conclusion that, well, obviously you seem to identify Israel with the Jews everywhere. Well, if that's the case, then people who don't like Israel have every reason to take out their hatred on individual Jews. So,
Ergo,
yeah, yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. Um, but I still think though that you could have just the simple power, the simple weight of the people who control the internet, that they can make life very, very difficult. I mean, probably you can't it'd be very difficult to pull off. But remember what they did to Trump in 2021. I mean, just boom, you just kick him off all the social media platforms. Now, of course, that didn't destroy Trump, Um, but nonetheless, it had an effect. And it did have a chilling effect. I mean, it's quite terrifying, the effect that it had 2021, 2022. And then things changed when Elon Musk took over Twitter. So you kind of have to wonder whether, whether something along those lines will be tried again.
Well, they should do it at their own peril because it's something that is ubiquitous. You and I don't talk about it all the time because it's like, noticing the air you breathe. Is that the more the gatekeepers go down this path, the more conspiratorial people will become. Okay. And do you want to deal with that? Okay. Basically, you want to create a psychotic society of lack of trust.
Right,
And maybe that's their design. I don't
right,
know. But
right,
that's going to be the result. That's going to be the result. And you know who that benefits? Nick Fuentes, okay? Because people think that he has some kind of inside insight on
right.
what's going on. That guy is an amazingly powerful speaker.
Yes.
I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a couple of people, a few people on YouTube. They're just bottom feeder, total bottom feeders. What they do is they take Nick Fuentes, I don't know, whatever platform he's on, and then they put it on their own channel and then have their little themselves in a little box
Oh,
in the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like,
That's it.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, Nick Fuentes is on YouTube,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
and these bottom feeders are making money off of him, okay, because they get the money from YouTube, okay. So I hate people that do that. I think they have no integrity. I know a number of people, some people that do it, and I know tooth people in particular that do it, and I think it's disgusting. But the more you want to control it, the more people are going to disperse. It's like, have you ever put mercury in your hand?
yeah.
We did that as a kid. Go.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
weird. It was
yes,
fun. It's
yes,
actually probably unhealthy to do it, but
yes.
no, this is where we're going. That's why we try to stay away from predictions. How will Joe Kent fare? My money is on he's going to succeed. My money's there.
Yeah, I tend to think so as well. Now, it's a very interesting one whether they'll prosecute him. I can
Yeah, well, do that at your peril.
do that at your peril. That's right. But yeah, because I think public sympathy will be with him. Particularly, if he says, "Yeah, I was leaking because I was trying to stop this war." I think that's absolutely that has integrity there.
Oh,
Yeah.
leaking's never happened before, too, George, right?
Exactly. Whereas, going back to where we started, Tulsi Gabbard, I think, has shown no integrity, and I think that's pretty much it. That she doesn't have a future. You can't betray, all of the principles that you espoused, and still think that you have some sort of a future. I mean, she looked ridiculous. She just absolutely looked ridiculous when she testified. And so I think she's done. I think he may well have a big future ahead of him.
They're not done with Tucker.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know, yeah, there's I'm a little older than Tucker. We both are. Okay. And I think he has kind of an imagined mythology about America, and it's a feel-good one. And there's nothing wrong. Every society is built on mythologies. Okay. Um, and I think that's what a lot of people connect with him. But what he has to face is that not only they want to destroy him, they want to destroy that mythology as well. And that's what makes him very, very powerful. Um, I never, I remember when he was fired from Fox and you and I were saying, oh, he's going to be fine. He'll be all right. Okay. And he has been, but to a degree that I didn't even think was possible. Okay.
Right,
Because he's turning into the conscience of the nation.
right, right, right.
And I don't think that's his intent. I don't know. Maybe he pulls the wool over our eyes all the time. I don't know. Okay, but he's a phenomenon. I
Right,
mean,
right,
Joe Kent was on within 24 hours. He was on with Tucker, and
right,
that's the ticket. It's not ZBS or CNN or
right.
New York Times. No,
right,
That's your, and Scott Horton, God bless you. You had him next, okay?
right, right,
Um,
right, right. No, that
I worry about his safety. You know why? Because decapitation is the name of the game.
well, that's the thing, and that's why these assassinations are always very troubling because if somebody's assassinated and right away, oh, lone assassin. I mean, no conspiracy, was just one person. And and I think that's what the problem is when you have these things, and the way become routinized violence. Is every time there is something quite shocking event, the immediately there's the media consensus, which is, well, this was just simply a nutcase. It's a lone assassin.
Yeah.
There was no conspiracy whatsoever. Just one crazy guy.
There's still smoke coming out of the barrel of the gun, but the consensus has been made.
Because that's right. That's right. And that's why I think it was useful to look at what Joe Kent said. Well, I know there were a lot of things that no one seemed to be very interested in following up. And that's why I think with Tucker Carlson, I mean, with Mark Levin, almost every day, he's ranting and raving about Tucker Carlson. Now, Levin may be, unhinged, but Trump listens to him. Trump
He wrote
reposts
that
it.
slop for him.
Yeah, he reposts everything Mark Levin says, and then we talked the other day about that encomium that he wrote for Mark Levin. There's encomium. He's the finest man who ever walked the face of the earth. He posts that. The president of the United States posts that.
In the
Uh,
middle of a war?
yeah. So that's why you have to take seriously when this person is hasn't is too smart to call for the death of Tucker Carlson, but the constant smearing of Tucker Carlson, you have to think, well, this may
Well,
have dangerous
I
consequences.
mean, he's talking. I want to be careful with my words here. He wants to extinguish Tucker's public persona.
Right.
Now, it's just one more step to the
Right.
next step.
Exactly. 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 Right. I think absolutely. And of course, and then Megyn Kelly, and then remove all voices.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Just as a minor aside, um, uh, Laura Ingraham, she's getting cold feet. Okay, she's pushing
She
back a
always
little
does. I mean,
bit.
that's not the first time with.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the thing is that she's very aware of her audience. Okay, and I mean, I think she's absolute complete lightweight. Okay, I don't think she's particularly well informed,
Yeah.
and I think she has a grudge against against the men at Fox,
Yeah.
and maybe that's justified. I don't know, but she reads her audience much better because Sean is on last, right?
Is it well? Or before? Is it? Yeah. I think. And then that comedy thing, isn't it? The
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
see, I have a theory. Okay, so it's Jesse Waters, Laura Ingraham,
No, I think
and
it's the other way. It's Laura Ingraham, then Jesse Waters, then Sean
oh,
Hannity.
okay, all right, but it works. My theory works. For Sean Hannity, he gets the people that are 75 and older. Okay, so I mean, he has the crowd that doesn't even know how to change the channel. Okay, and it's just on. That's his audience. Okay,
Right.
and then the chugs that show up in his studio and he throws footballs and like what are they like? You feeding the seals or
Right.
something? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
primitive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, no, but there is a sensitivity there. But this is all a train wreck. And the interview that Tucker did, Tulsi's testimony, it's a total train wreck.
Yeah.
You and I couldn't have scripted this 5 years ago.
Right. No, it completely. It's just and today, what is it, Friday, and then you think, okay, how many more wild and ridiculous propositions is Trump going to state between now and the end of business of Friday? Which means, what other things is he going to say
Well,
about the war? Who
let's
started
put
this
it
war, and what Iran was
let's
planning on doing?
let's put it this way. We're signing off here on a Friday evening for me. And we're going to reconvene my time Sunday morning, and then we reconvene again Sunday evening. Even between Sunday morning and on a Sunday,
That's right.
Sunday morning to a Sunday evening,
Right.
you and I will be talking. What are we going to talk about?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
Things are going very, very badly for this administration.
Yeah.
Very badly.
Right.
You know, Joe Kent is the first high-ranking intelligence official to resign since the Vietnam War. Most of the people watching this podcast don't remember the Vietnam War.
Right.
George and I were, little guys. But this is huge.
Right.
And Joe Kent, even though George and I disagree with many things he had to say, but Joe Kent, he acquitted himself very well.
Yeah.
That's why there's so much hatred
Yeah.
directed towards him. Tulsi Gabbard absolutely crushed her career.
Right.
She is a footnote to a footnote to a footnote.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. 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 She will be, don't remember as a laughing stock. And when she doubtless tries to revive her career with some big resignation speech, she'll already be done. There'll be hardly any attention paid at all to her. I mean,
Okay. For example, everyone, let's say, theoretically, parenthetically, that she resigns an hour after we end this podcast. George, on Sunday and Monday, I don't want to talk about it.
I don't know. No, no, no,
There's
nothing.
nothing to talk about.
Nothing. That's right.
Okay. All
Because
right.
even more than Joe Kent, this was her signature issue. Not just a peripheral issue, it's your signature issue. You laid it on the line. War against Iran, over and over again. You laid it on the line. That's your issue. And your personal integrity, that you are on a much higher moral plane than anyone else. You served in uniform. My brothers and sisters in uniform. You're protecting your brothers and sisters in uniform. And when you lay it all on the line and then you show not the slightest inkling of any personal integrity, then people really come to dislike you. You took everyone for a ride. As you rose, in this
Yeah.
your career really,
The juxtaposition is that Trump never claimed to be a choir boy.
Well, that's the thing. That's how Trump gets away with it, is that he
That's
never
right.
he never really made personal integrity his signature theme, because no one would believe it. He knew that no one's going to believe that he's a man of great personal integrity. But with her, that whole manner of hers and that voice, that resonating with intense feeling, honesty, integrity. That's what I stand for. The very opposite. And so I think that's why I think she's so completely discredited now.
Yeah. I'll say it. Good riddance.
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, good riddance. We don't want to hear or see from her again.
No, you have nothing compelling to say, okay? Because your testimony, it wasn't compelling. It
Right.
wasn't, there was no integrity behind it.
Right.
You were just an empty shell all along, okay?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Another one bites the dust, as they say. All right, everybody. That's our wrap here for Friday.
Friday.
Friday. I'm doing my best, buddy. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say it. Okay. All right. This is a Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. I'm getting a lot of turbulence at my feet right now, and it's all about two words: tip jar.
Tip jar, exactly, Buddy, because Apple was the one who was agitating earlier, and now Buddy's taken over and said, I've had it. Just I'm not taking it anymore. I have to work a year and a day doing going through all this terribly tedious material, and what do I get for it? Buddy's a hardliner.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, Apple. You can negotiate.
he's Revolutionary Guard, man.
Exactly. This is exactly. This is the sort of the Lenin figure within the movement. So if you have anything at all that you're not putting to good use, some gold bullion, $100 bills, everything into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology. And maybe we can't deal with Buddy, but maybe we can get Apple to be more amenable to negotiation.
Laranjani type guy.
It's
Yeah.
like is the Laranjani figure. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.